The cream-colored invitation cards lay spread across my desk like evidence in a case I hadn't yet solved. Each one bore Eden's flawless handwriting, that careful script she'd perfected during her sorority days at Yale. Sunday dinner, the Brantor residence, 7 sharp. I'm Nate Brantor, and for the past 3 years, I've watched my wife orchestrate these elaborate dinner parties with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. As a forensic accountant for the Treasury Department, I appreciate attention to detail, but Eden's Sunday rituals bordered on obsessive. Every napkin folded identically, every wine glass positioned exactly 2 inches from the plate's edge, every conversation topic carefully curated to maintain the delicate social ecosystem of our affluent Connecticut neighborhood. The guest list never varied: the Favrens, the Hesslors, and the Wellers. 3 power couples who controlled the local country club, school board, and municipal planning committee. Marcus Favren ran a hedge fund that managed half the town's retirement accounts. David Hesslor owned the largest construction company in the county. James Weller had built a tech empire before turning 40. Their wives, Raina, Vanna, and Arden, served as the neighborhood's unofficial social arbiters. And then there was Eden, the perfect hostess who somehow managed to charm them all. "Nate, darling, could you check the wine cellar?" Eden's voice drifted from the kitchen, accompanied by the rhythmic chopping of vegetables. "I want to make sure we have enough of that Bordeaux Marcus enjoys." I descended into our basement, past the home gym where Eden spent 2 hours every morning maintaining her magazine-worthy figure. The wine cellar was her pride, temperature-controlled, humidity-monitored, each bottle cataloged in a leather-bound journal. As I counted Bordeaux bottles, my foot caught on something soft. Eden's gym bag, forgotten in the corner. The bag had shifted, revealing the corner of a phone I'd never seen before. My training kicked in immediately. In my profession, unexplained financial instruments always warranted investigation. Unexplained communication devices fell into the same category. I pulled the phone free, noting its expensive case and pristine condition. The screen lit up at my touch, displaying 3 unread messages. The first was from M. "Can't wait for tomorrow, same place?" The second from D. "Booked the usual suite. You're incredible." The third from J. "My wife suspects nothing. You're worth the risk." I stared at the screen, my analytical mind processing the implications while my husband's heart struggled to catch up. M, D, and J Marcus, David, James. The 3 husbands who sat at our dinner table every Sunday, praising Eden's cooking and complimenting her dress while their wives discussed charity galas and tennis tournaments. The phone buzzed again, a new message from M. "Thinking about last Tuesday. You drive me crazy." I scrolled through the message history, my Treasury training making quick work of the timeline. 18 months of coordinated meetings, hotel reservations, and intimate exchanges. Each affair carefully scheduled around the men's business trips, their wives' book club meetings, their children's school events. Eden had turned adultery into a precision operation. "Nate, did you find the wine?" Eden's voice carried down the stairs. "Just checking vintages," I called back, photographing the phone's contents with my own device before replacing it exactly where I'd found it. I climbed the stairs with 3 bottles of Bordeaux and a mind full of questions. Eden stood at the kitchen island, arranging hors d'oeuvres with artistic precision. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and she wore the navy dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. She looked exactly like the woman I'd married 5 years ago, except now I understood she was performing a role. "Perfect choice," she said, examining the wine labels. "Marcus will be thrilled. He was just telling me last week how much he appreciates good Bordeaux." The casual mention of her conversation with Marcus took on new meaning. When had they talked? Where? I filed the question away for later investigation. Our guests arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, as they had every Sunday for 3 years. Marcus Favren, tall and distinguished with silver temples, brought his usual bottle of champagne. His wife Raina, a sharp-featured brunette who ran the local art museum, carried a bouquet of white roses. David Hesslor, built like the construction worker he'd once been, shook my hand with his characteristic firm grip. Vanna, his petite wife who organized charity events, kissed Eden's cheek and complimented the table setting. James Weller, the youngest of the group at 38, arrived with his wife Arden, a former model who now managed high-end real estate. I watched Eden greet each guest, noting details I'd previously dismissed. The way Marcus's hand lingered on her waist during their hello kiss. David's appreciative glance at her figure when he thought no one was looking. James's whispered comment that made Eden laugh and touch his arm. "Nate, you're quiet tonight," Raina observed as we settled in the living room for cocktails. "Work keeping you busy?" "Always," I replied, accepting a martini from Eden. "Following paper trails, connecting financial dots. You'd be amazed what people think they can hide." "I imagine your job requires considerable patience," Vanna said. All that careful investigation before reaching conclusions. Patience and thoroughness, I agreed. Rush to judgment, and you might miss the real story. Eden's hand trembled slightly as she served the appetizers, but her smile never wavered. She moved between the men with practiced grace, ensuring Marcus's glass stayed full, laughing at David's construction site stories, asking James about his latest business acquisition. The wives seemed oblivious to the subtle interplay, discussing their own concerns about school fundraisers and country club politics. Dinner proceeded with Eden's usual flawless execution. Lobster bisque followed by herb-crusted lamb, paired with wines she'd selected to complement each course. The conversation flowed smoothly between business, local politics, and social events. I participated when required, but mostly observed, cataloging every interaction through my new lens of understanding. Eden, this lamb is extraordinary, Marcus said, raising his glass in her direction. You've outdone yourself again. You're too kind, Eden replied, her cheeks flushing with what I now recognized as something more than modesty. Seriously, Eden, David added. My compliments to the chef. This seasoning blend is perfect. I'm just glad everyone's enjoying it, she said, her eyes meeting his for a moment longer than necessary. James leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach appreciatively. I keep telling Arden she should get your recipes, but she insists her cooking is hopeless. I'd be happy to teach you, Eden offered to Arden. We could do a cooking afternoon sometime. The irony wasn't lost on me, Eden offering to spend time with the wives while she systematically betrayed them. I wondered if she felt any guilt, or if this was simply another performance in her repertoire. After dinner, we moved to the patio for coffee and dessert. Eden had prepared her signature chocolate soufflé, individual portions served in delicate ramekins. The evening air was crisp with autumn's approach, and she'd arranged blankets for the ladies and cigars for the men. This has been lovely, Raina said, settling into her chair with a contented sigh. These Sunday dinners are the highlight of my week. Mine too, Vanna agreed. It's so nice to have friends you can count on. To friendship, Arden raised her coffee cup, and everyone joined the toast. I watched Eden accept their gratitude and affection, her performance flawless even as she planned her next betrayal. The phone in her gym bag probably contained detailed schedules for the coming week's encounters. Hotel reservations, restaurant meetings, carefully orchestrated lies to maintain her triple deception. As the evening wound down and our guests prepared to leave, I helped Eden clear dishes while the others gathered coats and purses. In the kitchen, she seemed to relax slightly, the constant performance taking its toll. Another successful evening, I commented, loading glasses into the dishwasher. I think everyone enjoyed themselves, she replied, but there was something strained in her voice. They certainly seemed to appreciate your efforts, especially the men. Eden's hands stilled on the serving platter she was covering. What do you mean? Nothing specific, just that they're always very complimentary about your cooking, your hosting, your attention to detail. She resumed her task without meeting my eyes. I just want everyone to feel welcome. You certainly achieved that goal. After our guests departed, Eden and I finished cleaning in companionable silence. She seemed tired, which I attributed to the energy required for maintaining multiple deceptions. I wondered how she kept the details straight, which lies she'd told to which husband, how she managed the scheduling without conflicts. I'm exhausted, she said finally, hanging up the dish towel. I think I'll take a bath and go to bed early. Good idea. You've earned the rest. She kissed my cheek, the same casual affection she'd shown for 5 years of marriage. Thank you for being such a wonderful co-host. I couldn't do this without you. The statement carried unintended irony. She was right. She couldn't maintain her elaborate deception without my unwitting cooperation, my house, my reputation in the community providing cover for her activities. I waited until I heard bathwater running upstairs before returning to the wine cellar. The phone remained where I'd found it, now showing 2 new messages. One from David. Thanks for a perfect evening. Can't wait for Wednesday. Another from James. You looked beautiful tonight. Wish we could have talked privately. I photographed the new messages and began scrolling through the phone's complete history. What I found was a masterpiece of organization and deception. Color-coded calendars tracking each man's schedule, separate photo albums containing intimate images, detailed notes about preferences, schedules, and security measures. Eden had approached adultery with the same meticulous planning she brought to her dinner parties. The earliest messages dated back 18 months, shortly after Marcus Favren had joined the country club board and begun attending our Sunday dinners regularly. David and James had been added to both the dinner rotation and Eden's romantic calendar within months of each other. She'd built her network of lovers systematically, using social events to identify targets and establish patterns. I found hotel receipts buried in obscure expense categories, restaurant charges disguised as charitable donations, even a separate credit card I'd never seen statements for. Aiden had created a parallel financial life to support her activities, one that would have remained hidden from anyone less skilled in forensic accounting. The scope of her deception was breathtaking, not just the affairs themselves, but the elaborate infrastructure required to maintain them. Safe houses, secure communications, financial instruments, even what appeared to be a network of accomplices who provided alibis and cover stories. I closed the phone and returned it to the gym bag, my mind already working through implications and possibilities. Eden had built her house of lies with impressive skill, but every structure had weaknesses. Every system could be compromised. Every deception eventually faced exposure. The question wasn't whether Eden's secret life would be revealed, but when and how, and whether I would be the agent of that revelation. Upstairs, I could hear Eden humming in the bathtub, probably planning her next encounter while soaking in lavender-scented water. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to face its first serious audit. I poured myself a glass of the Bordeaux Marcus had enjoyed so much and settled into my home office. Tomorrow would begin a different kind of investigation, one where the stakes were personal and the evidence would determine not just financial fraud, but the future of my marriage and the stability of our entire social circle. The cream-colored invitation cards still lay on my desk, reminders of Eden's talent for orchestrating elaborate deceptions, but now I was planning my own event, one that would require equally careful preparation and attention to detail. After all, I'd learned from the best. Monday morning brought the familiar routine of coffee, newspaper, and the drive to my treasury office in Hartford. But everything felt different now, as if I were viewing my life through a forensic lens. Eden kissed me goodbye at the door, her lips tasting of mint toothpaste and lies. She mentioned plans for grocery shopping and a yoga class, but I wondered which of her lovers she'd actually be meeting. My office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower overlooking the Connecticut River. As a senior forensic accountant, I specialized in unraveling complex financial schemes, shell companies, offshore accounts, elaborate money laundering operations. The irony that my own wife had been conducting her own covert financial operation wasn't lost on me. I settled at my desk with a fresh cup of coffee and opened a new case file, one I'd never submit to my supervisors. Subject: Eden Brantor. Investigation: suspected financial irregularities and coordinated deception. The familiar structure of a formal investigation helped organize my thoughts and emotions. My first task was establishing a complete financial picture. I pulled our joint credit card statements for the past 18 months, cross-referencing charges with Eden's supposed activities. The patterns emerged quickly once I knew what to look for. A charge at the Riverside Inn on March 15th, the same day Eden claimed to be visiting her sister in Boston. Another at Chez Laurent restaurant on April 3rd, when she'd supposedly been at a charity planning meeting. The amounts were small enough to avoid attention: lunch for two, drinks for two, never the obvious hotel charges that would have raised flags. But Eden was smarter than obvious hotel charges. I found payments to something called wellness retreat services that, after some investigation, turned out to be a high-end day spa that rented private suites by the hour. Charges to personal development seminars that traced back to a boutique hotel in nearby Mystic. Even gym membership fees for a facility that offered private training rooms and discreet parking. Each financial breadcrumb led to another piece of Eden's infrastructure. She'd built a network of locations and services that provided privacy and plausible cover stories. The woman who forgot to balance her checkbook had somehow created a sophisticated system for hiding extramarital affairs. My desk phone rang, interrupting my investigation. "Nate, it's Marcus Favrin. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." The sound of his voice triggered a spike of anger I hadn't expected. This man had sat at my dinner table, drunk my wine, and complimented my wife while planning his next intimate encounter with her. "Not at all, Marcus. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you again for last night. Eden really outdid herself with that meal. You're a lucky man." "I'm beginning to understand just how lucky," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Listen, I was wondering if you might have time for lunch this week. There's a business matter I'd like to discuss with you, something that might benefit us both." I almost laughed at the audacity. Marcus wanted to involve me in some business scheme while he was sleeping with my wife. "I'm pretty swamped this week, but let me check my calendar and get back to you." "Of course. No rush. And please give my regards to Eden. Tell her I'm still thinking about that chocolate souffle." "I'm sure you are," I thought, ending the call. The conversation crystallized something important. These men didn't see me as a threat. To them, I was Eden's boring accountant husband, useful for hosting dinner parties and providing social respectability, but otherwise invisible. They'd grown comfortable with their deception, confident in their security. That confidence would be their weakness. I spent the rest of the morning mapping out Eden's network of deception. 3 lovers, each believing himself to be her only extramarital partner. 3 wives, each trusting Eden as a friend and confidant. A web of lies so complex that its collapse would create chaos throughout our social circle. At lunch, I drove to the Riverside Inn, the location of several suspicious charges. The desk clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, was initially reluctant to discuss guest information. But a treasury badge and some carefully worded questions about financial irregularities loosened her tongue. "Oh, Mrs. Brantor," she said when I showed Eden's photo. "She's been coming here for months, always books the same suite, always pays cash for incidentals. Very discreet, very polite." "Does she usually come alone?" The clerk glanced around nervously. "Well, I probably shouldn't say, but she usually meets someone here. Different gentlemen, all very well dressed. They seem like business meetings, very professional." I thanked her and left a business card, suggesting she call if she remembered any other details about Mrs. Brantor's business meetings. My next stop was Chez Laurent, an upscale French restaurant where Eden had supposedly never been. The maitre d' recognized her photo immediately. "Madame Brantor." "Yes, she dines with us regularly. Always requests table 12 in the corner, very private. She has excellent taste in wine." "Does she usually dine alone?" "Oh no, always with a gentleman. Actually, several different gentlemen over the months. I assumed they were business associates. She's quite charming." The picture was becoming clearer. Eden had established regular patterns with each lover. Specific locations, preferred times, carefully maintained routines that minimized the risk of discovery. She'd turned infidelity into a business operation, complete with operational security and customer service. I returned to the office and spent the afternoon creating detailed timelines for each affair. Marcus appeared to be the primary relationship, with meetings twice weekly at various locations. David was secondary, typically meeting Eden during his lunch breaks at hotels near his construction sites. James was the most recent addition, their encounters usually scheduled around his business travel. The coordination required was impressive. Eden had to track 3 different schedules, maintain 3 different emotional relationships, and create plausible cover stories for dozens of absences. She'd also had to manage the financial aspects, ensuring that suspicious charges didn't appear on our joint accounts while maintaining her lifestyle. My phone buzzed with a text message from Eden. "Grocery shopping taking longer than expected. We'll be home by 6. Love you." I checked the timestamp against my research. Based on her patterns, Eden was probably at the wellness retreat with David Hesslor, whose construction schedule typically ended by 3 o'clock on Mondays. The casual lie, sent with a heart emoji, crystallized my resolve. Eden wasn't just cheating on our marriage. She was insulting my intelligence with these transparent deceptions. She'd built her entire secret life on the assumption that I was too boring, too trusting, or too stupid to notice. She was about to learn the cost of underestimating a Treasury forensic accountant. I spent the remainder of the afternoon researching the 3 wives. Raina Favren had inherited substantial wealth from her family's textile fortune and served on the boards of several cultural institutions. Vanna Hesslor came from modest backgrounds but had built a successful event planning business. Arden Weller had transitioned from modeling to real estate, specializing in luxury properties. All 3 women had their own resources, their own social networks, and their own reasons to feel betrayed by Eden's deception. More importantly, all 3 had the means to make their husbands' lives very complicated in divorce proceedings. Connecticut's divorce laws favored the wronged party, especially when adultery could be proven. Financial settlements could be punitive, and social consequences in our small, wealthy community could be devastating. The 3 men who thought they were so clever had actually positioned themselves for spectacular downfalls. But first, I needed irrefutable evidence. That evening, Eden arrived home exactly at 6, carrying grocery bags and full of stories about her day. She'd apparently run into several neighbors at the store, spent extra time selecting wine for next week's dinner party, and stopped by the florist to order flowers for Vanna Heslor's birthday celebration. I listened to her elaborate fiction while helping unpack groceries, noting the small details that didn't quite align. Her hair was slightly mussed despite supposedly spending the afternoon in air-conditioned stores. Her lipstick had been reapplied, but not perfectly. Most tellingly, she smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. "How was your day?" she asked, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Interesting case came across my desk, complex financial fraud involving multiple parties and elaborate cover-up schemes. Eden's hand stilled for just a moment. Sounds challenging. The fascinating thing is how these schemes always unravel. People get overconfident, start taking shortcuts, assume they're smarter than the investigators. But financial evidence doesn't lie, and patterns always emerge. "I'm sure you'll solve it," she said, but her voice carried a note of tension. "Oh, I always do. It's just a matter of time and patience." We prepared dinner together, maintaining the comfortable domestic routine we'd established over 5 years of marriage. Eden chatted about plans for the week, upcoming social events, and her ideas for Thursday's dinner party. She seemed genuinely excited about entertaining, as if the social performance energized her. I found myself studying her with new eyes, trying to understand the psychology behind her elaborate deception. Was this about the thrill of risk, the validation of multiple lovers, or simply boredom with our marriage? Did she feel guilty about betraying not just me, but the 3 wives who considered her a friend? After dinner, Eden retreated to her home office to plan next week's menu and confirm RSVPs. I knew she was probably coordinating schedules with her lovers, arranging the next round of encounters while I cleaned the kitchen. The domesticity of it all was surreal. We were like actors in a play, each performing our roles while knowing the script was fundamentally false. Eden played the devoted wife and gracious hostess. I played the oblivious husband, grateful for her attention to our social life. But the performance was about to change dramatically. I waited until Eden was asleep before retrieving her phone from the gym bag. New messages confirmed my suspicions about the afternoon's activities. David had sent a photo of himself at a construction site, along with the message, "Thinking about this afternoon, you're incredible." Marcus had forwarded details about a weekend conference in New York, with the suggestion that Eden might enjoy a cultural weekend in the city. James had shared his travel schedule for the following month, highlighting several opportunities for business dinners. I photographed everything, building a comprehensive digital file of evidence. Hotel reservations, restaurant bookings, intimate messages, financial arrangements. Eden had documented her own deception with remarkable thoroughness. The phone also revealed something I hadn't expected, a group chat with 3 other women I didn't recognize. The conversation centered on managing multiple relationships and maintaining operational security. Eden wasn't working alone. She was part of a network of women who shared strategies for conducting extramarital affairs. One message thread discussed husband management techniques and creating believable cover stories. Another focused on financial security and protecting assets during relationship transitions. These women had turned adultery into a collaborative enterprise, sharing resources and expertise. The discovery added a new dimension to my investigation. Eden wasn't just betraying our marriage. She was part of a systematic operation that targeted wealthy men in committed relationships. The Sunday dinner parties weren't just social events. They were reconnaissance missions, opportunities to identify and cultivate potential targets. I returned the phone to its hiding place and went to bed, my mind racing with implications and possibilities. Eden lay beside me, sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about her next romantic encounter. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to face a comprehensive audit. Tomorrow, I would begin the next phase of my investigation, direct surveillance and evidence gathering. Eden had taught me the importance of meticulous planning and attention to detail. Now I would apply those lessons to dismantling everything she'd built. The student was about to become the teacher. Tuesday morning arrived with autumn rain drumming against our bedroom windows. Eden stretched luxuriously beside me, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like a silk fan. For a moment, watching her peaceful face, I almost convinced myself that yesterday's discoveries had been a nightmare. Then she reached for her phone, the visible one, and the illusion shattered. "I have yoga at 10, then lunch with Raina to discuss the museum fundraiser," she announced, scrolling through her schedule. "I should be home by 3 to start dinner prep." I nodded, buttering my toast while mentally cross-referencing her stated plans with the hidden phone's message history. Based on the pattern I'd identified, Tuesday was typically Marcus Day, which meant Eden's lunch with Raina was probably fictional. "Sounds like a busy day. I might work late tonight. We're closing a major case." "Of course, darling. I'll keep dinner warm." The casual lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. According to the hidden phone, Marcus had reserved their usual suite at the Riverside Inn for a 2-hour afternoon appointment. Eden would spend the time she claimed to be planning charity events in bed with another woman's husband. After Eden left for her fabricated yoga class, I made a call to my supervisor. "Tom, I need to take a few personal days. Family matter that requires immediate attention." Tom Harrison had been my boss for 8 years and knew I rarely requested time off. "Everything okay, Nate? You sound stressed." "Just need to handle some complicated domestic issues. I'll have my phone if anything urgent comes up. Take care of yourself. Family comes first. If only he knew how literally I intended to follow that advice. I spent the morning preparing for surveillance, drawing on techniques I'd learned during Treasury training, nondescript clothing, backup transportation, digital recording equipment, and a detailed plan for maintaining visual contact without detection. Eden's predictable patterns would work in my favor. She'd grown comfortable with her routines, confident in her security. At 11:30, I positioned myself in the Riverside Inn parking lot with a clear view of both entrances. Eden's silver BMW arrived at exactly noon, followed 5 minutes later by Marcus's black Mercedes. They didn't acknowledge each other in the parking lot, maintaining the pretense of coincidental arrival. I watched them enter the hotel separately, Eden first, then Marcus, after a carefully timed delay. The operational security was impressive. They'd clearly rehearsed these procedures to minimize the risk of detection. My phone buzzed with a text from Eden. Lunch running long. Raina has so many ideas for the fundraiser. Home by 4. The audacity was breathtaking. Eden was literally texting me from a hotel room where she was meeting her lover, using her supposed friend as cover for her deception. I wondered if Raina had any idea her name was being used to facilitate adultery. At 2:15, Marcus emerged from the hotel, adjusting his tie and checking his watch. He looked satisfied, like a man who just concluded successful business. Eden appeared 10 minutes later, her hair slightly different than it had been that morning, her lipstick freshly applied. They left in separate vehicles, maintaining their careful protocols. I followed Eden at a discreet distance, curious about her next destination. Instead of heading home, she drove to the Westfield Mall and spent 45 minutes shopping, apparently establishing an alibi for her extended absence. When I arrived home that evening, Eden greeted me with enthusiasm, full of stories about her lunch with Raina and their ambitious plans for the museum fundraiser. She'd even purchased a small gift for Raina's birthday, a silk scarf that would serve as physical evidence of her fictional shopping trip. "How was your day?" she asked, serving the pasta she'd prepared. "Productive. Made significant progress on that fraud case I mentioned. Sometimes the evidence is hiding in plain sight." Eden's fork paused midway to her mouth. That must be satisfying, uncovering the truth. It's what I live for. People think they can construct elaborate deceptions, but financial trails always lead back to reality. I imagine it takes considerable skill to build convincing false narratives. More skill than most people realize. The successful ones understand that every lie needs supporting evidence, every deception requires consistent details. But eventually, someone always makes a mistake. We ate in comfortable silence, both of us absorbed in our own thoughts. Eden was probably planning her next encounter, while I was designing her exposure. The domestic tranquility felt surreal, like the calm before a devastating storm. Wednesday brought rain again, which complicated surveillance but provided better cover for my activities. Eden's schedule called for a morning at the spa, followed by grocery shopping and dinner preparation. The hidden phone revealed her actual plan, a lunch meeting with David Heslor at a boutique hotel near his latest construction project. I arrived at the Mystic Harbor Inn ahead of schedule, positioning myself with a view of the registration desk through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows. The hotel catered to business travelers and discreet encounters, with private entrances and minimal security cameras. David arrived first, his work truck conspicuous among the luxury sedans in the parking lot. He'd clearly showered and changed clothes since leaving his construction site, trading work boots for polished shoes and a button-down shirt. The effort he'd put into his appearance suggested this was more than a casual encounter. Eden's BMW pulled up 20 minutes later. She wore a navy dress I'd never seen before, probably purchased specifically for these meetings. Her transformation from suburban housewife to sophisticated mistress was remarkable. Different posture, different energy, different persona entirely. I watched them embrace in the lobby, noting the familiarity of their interaction. This wasn't a new relationship. They'd developed genuine intimacy over months of secret meetings. David's hand rested possessively on Eden's waist as they walked toward the elevator bank. My phone buzzed. "Spa appointment running late. Might skip grocery shopping and order takeout tonight. Love you." Another casual lie, delivered with a heart emoji while she was literally in another man's arms. The emotional disconnect was staggering. How did Eden compartmentalize her feelings so effectively? Did she feel any guilt about these elaborate deceptions, or had she simply redefined morality to suit her desires? They emerged 2 hours later, both looking relaxed and satisfied. David kissed Eden goodbye in the parking lot, a lingering embrace that spoke of genuine affection. Whatever else these relationships were, they weren't merely physical. Eden had formed emotional connections with each of her lovers. That realization complicated my feelings about her betrayal. I could have understood a momentary lapse, a single mistake born of opportunity and desire. But Eden had built multiple relationships, invested emotional energy in 3 different men, created elaborate infrastructures to support ongoing deceptions. This wasn't weakness, it was calculated betrayal. Thursday arrived with crisp autumn sunshine, perfect weather for Eden's weekly dinner party. She spent the morning preparing, humming while she arranged flowers and polished silver. Her enthusiasm was genuine. These social events energized her, provided a stage for her considerable talents as a hostess. I helped with preparations while observing the 3 couples who would soon arrive. Marcus, who texted Eden throughout the day with restaurant recommendations and wine suggestions. David, who sent photos of a sunset from his construction site along with romantic poetry. James, who forwarded his travel schedule and suggested a weekend getaway. Each man believed himself to be special, the unique recipient of Eden's secret affections. None realized they were part of a rotation, scheduled and managed like any other business operation. Eden had turned them into commodities, valuable for what they provided, but ultimately interchangeable. The dinner party proceeded with Eden's usual flawless execution. Butternut squash soup, followed by duck confit with seasonal vegetables, paired with wine selected to complement each course. The conversation flowed smoothly between business updates, local politics, and social gossip. I watched the interactions with new understanding, noting subtle signals and hidden communications. Marcus's appreciative comments about the wine selection. David's compliments on Eden's dress. James's suggestion that Eden should consider catering professionally. Each man was performing for her benefit while their wives remained oblivious. "Eden, you've really outdone yourself tonight," Raina said during dessert. "This creme brulee is perfection." "You're so talented," Vanna added. "I don't know how you manage such elaborate meals every week." "It's all about planning and preparation," Eden replied, her eyes meeting Marcus's across the table. "Once you establish good systems, everything flows naturally." The double meaning wasn't lost on me. Eden had indeed established excellent systems for deception, scheduling, and emotional manipulation. Her success as a hostess and her success as an adulteress drew from the same skill set. After our guests departed, Eden and I cleaned up in companionable silence. She seemed energized by the evening's success, already planning next week's menu and discussing seasonal decorating ideas. Her ability to transition seamlessly between her various roles was remarkable. "Another wonderful evening," I commented, loading the dishwasher. "I think everyone enjoyed themselves. The duck was perfectly cooked, and that wine Marcus recommended was excellent." "When did Marcus recommend wine? I don't remember him mentioning it during dinner." Eden's hand stilled on the serving platter she was covering. "Oh, he called earlier this week. Just a quick conversation about wine pairings." Another lie, smoothly delivered. Marcus had indeed made wine recommendations, but through text messages to Eden's hidden phone, not through any conversation with me. Eden's ability to weave fiction into casual conversation was masterful. That was thoughtful of him. I should thank him for the suggestion. I'm sure he'd appreciate that. He really enjoys good wine. We finished cleaning and headed upstairs, maintaining the domestic routine that provided cover for Eden's elaborate deceptions. She seemed tired, which I attributed to the energy required for managing multiple relationships and maintaining consistent lies. As she prepared for bed, I reflected on everything I'd learned over the past week. Eden wasn't just unfaithful, she was operating a sophisticated deception that involved financial fraud, identity manipulation, and systematic betrayal of multiple relationships. The scope of her activities suggested this wasn't her first experience with elaborate infidelity. The hidden phone contained evidence of crimes beyond adultery, financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit deception. Eden had built her house of lies so extensively that its collapse would create legal as well as social consequences. But first, I needed to complete my evidence gathering. The 3 wives deserved to know the truth about their marriages and their supposed friend. The 3 husbands needed to face consequences for their arrogance and betrayal. And Eden needed to learn that underestimating people could be a costly mistake. I had one more phase of investigation to complete before implementing my plan for exposure. The evidence needed to be irrefutable, the timing perfect, and the consequences devastating. Eden had taught me the importance of meticulous planning. Now I would apply those lessons to orchestrating her downfall. Friday morning brought the kind of crystal-clear autumn day that makes Connecticut look like a postcard. Eden hummed while preparing breakfast, already planning her weekend activities with the same meticulous attention she brought to her dinner parties. According to her stated schedule, she had a charity committee meeting, followed by shopping for next week's groceries and a quiet evening at home. The hidden phone told a different story. James Weller had arranged a romantic weekend getaway at a bed and breakfast in the Berkshires, supposedly a business retreat that would keep him away from home until Sunday evening. Eden had coordinated her own cover story, a spontaneous girls' weekend with college friends who lived conveniently out of state. I might drive up to see Sarah and Michelle in Vermont, she mentioned casually over coffee. We've been trying to coordinate schedules for months, and they're both free this weekend. Sarah and Michelle were indeed Eden's college friends, but they lived in California and hadn't spoken to Eden in over 2 years. I knew this because I'd helped Eden send them Christmas cards with apologetic notes about losing touch. That sounds wonderful. You haven't seen them in ages. Exactly. It'll be nice to catch up and relax. I'll probably leave after my committee meeting and stay through Sunday. The casual deception was delivered with Eden's characteristic warmth, complete with excited details about her fictional friends' fictional lives. She'd clearly researched enough background information to make the story believable, probably using social media to gather current details about their careers and families. Drive safely. The mountain roads can be tricky this time of year. Of course, I'll text you when I arrive. And she would text me, probably from the romantic inn where she'd be spending the weekend with James, creating a digital trail that supported her fabricated location. After Eden left for her equally fictional committee meeting, I implemented the final phase of my surveillance operation. The weekend getaway would provide an opportunity to gather definitive evidence while Eden believed herself completely secure. The Berkshire Mountain Inn was exactly the kind of place wealthy couples chose for discreet romantic encounters. Isolated, elegant, and expensive enough to discourage casual visitors. I arrived ahead of schedule and positioned myself with a view of the main entrance, prepared for an extended observation period. James arrived first, driving his silver Porsche instead of the family SUV his wife would recognize. He'd clearly planned this carefully, probably telling Arden he was attending a business conference or visiting clients. The weekend bag he carried suggested he'd packed for romance rather than work. Eden's BMW appeared an hour later, right on schedule. She'd changed clothes since morning, trading her casual committee meeting outfit for a flowing dress that suggested weekend romance rather than college reunion. Her transformation was complete. Different clothes, different hairstyle, different energy entirely. I watched them embrace in the parking lot, noting the genuine affection in their interaction. Whatever else this relationship was, it involved real emotional connection. James held Eden like she was precious, and she responded with obvious happiness. They weren't just having an affair, they were playing out a romantic fantasy. My phone buzzed with Eden's promised text. Just arrived at Sarah's house. Beautiful drive through the mountains. Love you. The message was accompanied by a photo of autumn foliage that could have been taken anywhere in New England. Eden had probably snapped it during her drive to the inn, creating visual evidence to support her fictional location. I spent the weekend documenting their activities while maintaining careful distance. Long walks through the inn's gardens, intimate dinners in the restaurant, lazy mornings on their private balcony. They behaved like honeymooners, completely absorbed in each other and oblivious to outside observation. The most damaging evidence came Sunday morning, when I observed them having breakfast on the terrace. James presented Eden with a small jewelry box, and her delighted reaction suggested expensive contents. They were exchanging gifts, building traditions, creating shared memories. This wasn't casual adultery. It was a parallel relationship with its own anniversaries and milestones. Eden's Sunday evening return was perfectly orchestrated. She arrived home exactly when promised, full of stories about her wonderful weekend with college friends. She'd even purchased souvenirs from Vermont, maple syrup and artisanal cheese that she'd obviously bought at a local store to support her cover story. "How was your weekend?" she asked while unpacking her fictional purchases. "Quiet. Caught up on some reading, watched a few movies. How are Sarah and Michelle?" "Wonderful. Sarah just got promoted, and Michelle's youngest started kindergarten. We spent hours catching up." The lies flowed effortlessly, supported by specific details that made them believable. Eden had clearly researched her college friends' current situations, probably through social media, to create convincing fictional conversations. "It's great that you reconnected. You should do it more often. We're already planning another get-together for the holidays." More lies, building on the foundation of weekend deception. Eden was already establishing cover for future romantic encounters, using her fictional friendship renewal to justify regular absences. Monday morning brought the beginning of my final week of investigation. I'd gathered enough evidence to prove Eden's systematic deception, but I needed one more element to make my plan complete. Detailed information about the three wives and their likely reactions to discovering their husbands' betrayals. Reina Favren was the most formidable of the three women. Her family's textile fortune had made her independently wealthy, and her position on various cultural boards gave her significant social influence. She'd built her identity around being Marcus's perfect wife and social partner, which meant his betrayal would trigger both personal and public humiliation. Vanna Hessler came from modest backgrounds, but had worked hard to establish herself in our affluent community. Her event planning business depended on social connections and reputation, both of which would be threatened by David's affair. She'd also invested heavily in their marriage, supporting David through the early years of building his construction company. Arden Weller was the youngest and potentially most volatile of the three. Her modeling background had given her confidence in her appearance, but James's affair with Eden would strike at her fundamental sense of attractiveness and worth. She also had her own successful real estate career, which gave her financial independence and professional connections. All three women had the resources and motivation to make their husbands' lives very complicated. Connecticut's divorce laws favored the wronged party, especially when adultery could be proven with photographic evidence and financial records. The men who thought they were so clever had actually positioned themselves for spectacular downfalls. But beyond the legal consequences, the social fallout would be devastating. Our community was small and interconnected, with reputations built over decades and destroyed in moments. The three couples formed the core of our social circle, and their simultaneous collapse would send shockwaves through every relationship and institution they touched. Tuesday brought the final piece of my puzzle. Eden's hidden phone revealed plans for a celebration dinner with her network of fellow adulteresses. They were meeting Thursday evening to toast another successful quarter and plan expansion opportunities for the new year. The business terminology wasn't accidental. These women had turned extramarital affairs into a collaborative enterprise, sharing strategies and resources like any other professional network. They met regularly to discuss techniques, compare results, and identify new targets. Eden's role in the group was apparently as a specialist in social integration, using dinner parties and community events to identify and cultivate potential lovers. Her success with Marcus, David, and James had established her reputation within the network as particularly skilled at managing multiple relationships simultaneously. The discovery added another dimension to my planned exposure. Eden wasn't just betraying our marriage. She was part of a systematic operation that targeted wealthy men throughout our community. Her dinner parties weren't social events. They were hunting expeditions, opportunities to identify vulnerable husbands and assess their potential value. Wednesday evening, I made my final preparations. Eden was attending another fictional charity meeting while actually coordinating weekend plans with Marcus. I used her absence to prepare invitation cards, select wines, and plan a menu for my own dinner party. The invitations were simple but elegant, printed on cream cardstock that matched Eden's usual style. An evening of appreciation, the Brantor residence, Sunday, 7 sharp, celebrating friendship and trust. I hand-delivered each invitation to ensure personal receipt. Raina Favren was in her garden, tending to late-season roses. Vanna Hessler was at her office, planning a client's anniversary party. Arden Weller was showing a property to potential buyers. Each woman seemed pleased by the invitation, interpreting it as recognition of their friendship with Eden and appreciation for their contributions to our social circle. They had no idea they were being invited to witness the destruction of everything they thought they knew about their marriages and friendships. "How thoughtful of you and Eden," Raina said, examining the invitation. "We so rarely get to celebrate the bonds between couples." Eden's idea, actually. She wanted to do something special to show how much your friendship means to us. "She's such a treasure. Marcus and I feel so fortunate to know you both." The irony was devastating. Raina was praising the woman who'd been systematically betraying her for 18 months, expressing gratitude for friendship that was actually elaborate deception. Similar conversations played out with Vanna and Arden. Each woman was genuinely touched by the gesture, interpreting it as evidence of Eden's thoughtfulness and our couple's strong bonds. They were looking forward to an evening celebrating relationships that were actually built on lies. Thursday evening, Eden attended her network meeting while I made final preparations for Sunday's revelation. The menu was carefully planned. Appetizers that encouraged lingering conversation, main courses that required minimal attention once served, and dessert that could be delayed if necessary. Most importantly, I prepared the evidence packages that would accompany dessert. Each wife would receive a manila envelope containing photographs, financial records, message transcripts, and hotel receipts. The evidence was organized chronologically, telling the complete story of their husband's 18-month deception. Eden returned home energized by her evening with fellow conspirators, full of enthusiasm for their shared projects. She mentioned new opportunities they were exploring and techniques they'd discussed for managing complex situations. "Sounds like a productive meeting," I commented. "Very productive. We're all committed to supporting each other's goals." "Collaboration is important, especially when undertaking challenging projects. Exactly. Some things require coordinated effort to achieve optimal results. We were speaking in code, both of us understanding that the conversation carried deeper meaning. Eden thought she was discussing her adultery network with an oblivious husband. I was actually confirming my understanding of her systematic deception while finalizing plans for her exposure. Friday and Saturday passed in careful preparation. Eden focused on her usual dinner party planning, selecting wines and preparing ingredients with her characteristic attention to detail. She seemed particularly excited about Sunday's gathering, interpreting it as recognition of her social skills and hostessing abilities. I spent the weekend reviewing my evidence and rehearsing my presentation. The timing would be crucial. Too early, and the wives might leave before seeing everything. Too late, and Eden might find an excuse to escape. The revelation needed to unfold systematically, building to an undeniable conclusion. Sunday morning arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp and clear with brilliant foliage providing a beautiful backdrop for the evening's devastating revelations. Eden spent the day in preparation, humming while she cooked and arranged flowers with artistic precision. She had no idea she was preparing for her own destruction, orchestrating the final performance of her career as the perfect hostess and devoted wife. By evening's end, everything she'd built through 18 months of careful deception would lie in ruins. The student had learned well from his teacher. Now it was time for the final examination. Sunday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made our neighborhood look like a magazine spread. Golden light filtered through the maple trees lining our street, and Eden had arranged pumpkins and mums on our front steps with her usual artistic flair. She moved through our house making final adjustments, straightening napkins, adjusting flower arrangements, checking wine temperatures with the precision of a conductor preparing for a symphony. "Everything looks perfect," I said, watching her light the candles in our dining room. "I want tonight to be special. It's not often we get to celebrate what really matters: friendship, trust, the bonds between couples who truly care about each other." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Eden was waxing poetic about trust while hiding 18 months of systematic betrayal. She was celebrating friendship while planning her next encounters with her supposed friends' husbands. "You've certainly created the perfect atmosphere," I replied, adjusting the manila envelopes I'd placed beneath each wife's dessert plate. At exactly 7 o'clock, our guests began arriving. Marcus and Raina Favren appeared first, Marcus carrying his usual bottle of champagne while Raina brought a bouquet of white roses from her garden. David and Vanna Heslor followed, David looking freshly showered from whatever construction site had occupied his afternoon, Vanna carrying a homemade pie that would complement Eden's planned dessert. James and Arden Weller arrived last, James apologizing for running late from a client meeting that had probably been another romantic encounter. I watched Eden greet each couple, noting details I'd previously missed. The way her hand lingered on Marcus's arm during their hello embrace, the knowing smile she exchanged with David when Vanna wasn't looking, the subtle wink she gave James while Arden was hanging up her coat. These weren't casual greetings between friends. They were coded communications between conspirators, acknowledgments of shared secrets and planned future encounters. Eden was conducting 3 separate relationships simultaneously while their wives stood mere feet away, oblivious to the deception. "This is such a lovely idea," Raina said as we gathered in the living room for cocktails. "We should celebrate friendship more often." "Absolutely," Vanna agreed, accepting a martini from Eden. "It's wonderful to have friends you can truly trust." "To trust." Arden raised her glass and everyone joined the toast. I watched Eden participate in the toast to trust while mentally calculating which of her lovers she'd see first this week. The woman had no shame, no apparent guilt about her systematic deception. She was performing the role of devoted friend while planning to betray every woman in the room. Dinner proceeded with Eden's usual flawless execution. Butternut squash soup with truffle oil, followed by herb-crusted rack of lamb with roasted vegetables, paired with wines she'd selected to complement each course. The conversation flowed smoothly between local politics, upcoming social events, and holiday planning. I participated when required, but mostly observed, cataloging every interaction through my new understanding of the relationships involved. Marcus's appreciative comments about the wine selection took on new meaning when I knew he'd helped Eden choose the bottles during their Tuesday afternoon encounter. David's compliments on the lamb preparation carried additional weight when I realized he'd probably tasted Eden's cooking during private dinners at discreet hotels. "Eden, you've really outdone yourself tonight," James said during the main course. "This lamb is perfection." "You're too kind," Eden replied, her cheeks flushing with what I now recognized as pleasure at praise from one of her lovers. "Seriously, Eden," David added, "you should consider professional catering. You have a real gift." "I just enjoy creating memorable experiences for people I care about," she said, her eyes meeting his for a moment longer than appropriate. The wives seemed oblivious to these subtle exchanges, absorbed in their own conversations about charity events and school fundraisers. They trusted Eden completely, viewing her as a supportive friend and confidant rather than the calculating predator she'd become. As we prepared for dessert, I excused myself to the kitchen, ostensibly to help Eden with final preparations. In reality, I was confirming that the evidence envelopes remained properly positioned beneath each wife's dessert plate. "This has been a wonderful evening," Eden said, arranging individual chocolate soufflés on her best china. "Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves." "They certainly seem relaxed and comfortable, nothing like the security of true friendship." Eden's hands paused slightly in their work. Something in my tone must have registered, a subtle shift that suggested deeper meaning. "Friendship is precious," she said carefully. "It requires honesty and mutual respect." "Absolutely. The foundation of any meaningful relationship is truth. Once that's compromised, everything else becomes meaningless." We returned to the dining room carrying dessert plates, Eden's soufflés arranged with her characteristic artistic precision. I'd chosen chocolate specifically because the rich flavor would provide a bitter counterpoint to the revelations that were about to unfold. "These look amazing," Vanna said, as I placed her plate carefully, ensuring the envelope remained hidden beneath. "Eden's soufflés are legendary," Marcus added, his fork poised to dig in. "Please, everyone start before they fall," Eden encouraged, settling into her own seat. I watched as each wife lifted her plate to taste the dessert, revealing the manila envelope that had been hidden beneath. The discovery happened almost simultaneously, Raina's eyebrows furrowing as she noticed the unexpected addition, Vanna's confused expression as she examined the envelope with her name written in my careful script, Arden's questioning look in my direction. "What are these?" Raina asked, holding up her envelope. "A small token of appreciation," I replied calmly. "Something I thought you should have." Eden was looking around the table with growing alarm, finally noticing the envelopes that hadn't been part of her careful table setting. "Nate, what's going on?" "Just sharing some information I thought our friends would find interesting. Please, ladies, go ahead and open them." The three husbands were looking confused, but not yet alarmed. They had no idea what the envelopes might contain, probably assuming I was distributing some kind of party favor or charitable donation request. Raina opened her envelope first, her face going pale as she examined the contents. Photographs of Marcus and Eden entering the Riverside Inn, credit card receipts from their romantic dinners, printed text messages planning their encounters. 18 months of evidence, organized chronologically and documented with forensic precision. Vanna's reaction was more dramatic. She made a choking sound as she saw the photos of David and Eden at the Mystic Harbor Inn, her hand flying to her mouth as she processed the implications. The pie she'd brought as a gesture of friendship suddenly seemed like a cruel joke. Arden's response was the most controlled, but potentially most dangerous. She examined each piece of evidence methodically, her model's training helping her maintain composure even as her world collapsed around her. But I could see fury building behind her carefully controlled expression. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, reaching for Raina's envelope. "Evidence," I replied simply. "Il a 18 months of documentation showing how your wife has been systematically betraying every person at this table." Eden was staring at me in shock, her face cycling through confusion, denial, and dawning horror as she realized the scope of my knowledge. "Nate, I can explain." "Please don't," I interrupted. "We're past the point where explanations matter." David had grabbed Vanna's envelope and was staring at photos of himself with Eden, his construction worker hands shaking as he processed the implications. "How did you—" "I'm a forensic accountant for the Treasury Department," I reminded him. "Following paper trails and documenting deception is literally what I do for a living." James was the last to understand, reaching across the table to examine Arden's evidence package. His face went ashen as he saw photos from their romantic weekend in the Berkshires, receipts from the jewelry he'd given Eden, printed messages planning future encounters. "You followed us," he said accusingly. "I investigated suspicious financial activity in my household accounts. What I found was a comprehensive network of deception involving my wife and 3 men who I'd considered friends." The silence that followed was deafening. Eden sat frozen in her chair, her perfect hostess persona finally cracking under the weight of exposure. The 3 husbands looked like they were processing the implications of their situation, not just the end of their affairs, but the potential legal and financial consequences of adultery in Connecticut. But it was the wives' reactions that would determine what happened next. Raina rose first, her inherited wealth and social standing lending her an effortless authority. 18 months, she said, her voice perfectly controlled. 18 months of lies. Every Sunday dinner, every social event, every conversation about trust and friendship. Raina, please let me explain, Marcus began. Explain what? How you've been sleeping with our hostess while I praised her cooking? How you've made me complicit in my own humiliation? Vanna was crying now, but her tears seemed to be fueling anger rather than sadness. I defended you, she said to Eden. When people gossiped about your marriage, when they suggested you were too perfect to be real, I stood up for you. I called you my closest friend. You are my friend, Eden said desperately. This doesn't change. Everything changes. Vanna slammed her hand on the table, making the wine glasses jump. Everything we've shared, every confidence, every moment of supposed friendship was built on lies. Arden's reaction was the most controlled, but perhaps most frightening. She was photographing the evidence with her phone, documenting everything with professional efficiency. This is quite comprehensive, she said, her voice eerily calm. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, text messages, even GPS data. Very thorough work, Nate. I learned the importance of documentation from Eden. She keeps excellent records. Eden flinched at the compliment turned weapon. Arden, please understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. You've been conducting a systematic operation to seduce married men while maintaining friendships with their wives. It's actually quite impressive from a strategic standpoint. The three husbands were looking increasingly panicked as they realized their wives weren't just hurt. They were furious and beginning to think strategically about consequences. We need to talk about this privately, Marcus said, standing and reaching for Raina's arm. She jerked away from his touch. Don't you dare touch me after what you've done. Vanna, honey, let's go home and discuss this, David tried. Home? You mean the house I helped you buy with my savings? The house I decorated while you were having affairs? That home? James was the smartest of the three, recognizing that his wife's calm was more dangerous than the other's obvious anger. Arden, I know you're upset. Upset? She looked at him with genuine curiosity. I'm not upset, James. I'm calculating. 18 months of adultery, documented with photographic evidence and financial records. Connecticut's divorce laws are quite favorable to the wronged party in cases like this. The legal implications were finally sinking in. All three men faced potentially devastating divorce settlements, especially with such comprehensive evidence of their infidelity. Their comfortable lives, their social positions, their carefully built reputations, everything was now at risk. Eden made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Please, everyone, we're all adults here. We can work through this. Work through this? Raina's voice was incredulous. You've been systematically betraying every woman at this table while we welcomed you into our homes, our lives, our most private moments. There's nothing to work through. The evidence suggests this was a coordinated operation, I added, pulling out printed pages from Eden's network communications, complete with strategic planning, resource sharing, and target identification. This wasn't passion or weakness. It was calculated predation. The revelation that Eden was part of a larger network seemed to be the final straw. The wives looked at each other, and I could see understanding passing between them. They weren't just individual victims. They were part of a systematic targeting operation. We should go, Raina said, gathering her evidence. We all have phone calls to make. Lawyers, Vanna agreed, wiping her tears and standing straighter. Private investigators, Arden added, still photographing documents. The three women moved toward the door with unified purpose, their shock transforming into determined action. The men started to follow, but their wives' expressions suggested the conversation would not be welcome. Raina, please, Marcus tried one more time. Your belongings will be on the lawn tomorrow morning, she replied without looking back. My attorney will contact you about temporary support and custody arrangements. Vanna, we can fix this, David pleaded. The only thing getting fixed is my mistake in trusting you, she said, her event planner's organizational skills already shifting into divorce mode. James didn't even try to speak to Arden. He recognized that his wife's calm efficiency was more dangerous than emotional outbursts. She was already planning his destruction with the same methodical approach she brought to real estate deals. The three women left together, probably planning to coordinate their legal strategies and share resources for the battles ahead. The three men stood in my dining room looking lost and panicked, their comfortable world of secret affairs and complicit wives suddenly transformed into a nightmare of legal consequences and social destruction. How could you do this? Marcus asked me, his usual confidence completely shattered. How could I expose systematic fraud and deception? It's literally my job. We trusted you, David said. You trusted me while sleeping with my wife. The irony is remarkable. James was the first to understand that arguing with me was pointless. The damage was done, the evidence was comprehensive, and their wives were already planning their destruction. We should go, he said to the other men. They filed out without another word, leaving Eden and me alone in our dining room with the ruins of her carefully orchestrated deception scattered across the table. Eden sat in stunned silence, staring at the evidence that had destroyed her world. The perfect hostess, the devoted friend, the charming socialite, all of it revealed as elaborate performance art designed to facilitate systematic betrayal. 18 months, I said finally. 18 months of lies. Every day, every conversation, every kiss goodnight. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Nate, I never meant for it to go this far. You built a network. You had systems, schedules, financial arrangements. You turned adultery into a business operation. This wasn't something that happened, it was something you created. I love you, she said desperately. No, you don't. You love the cover I provided, the respectability, the access to wealthy social circles, but you don't love me. The truth hung between us like a physical presence. Eden's tears were real, but they were tears of loss rather than remorse. She was mourning the destruction of her carefully built life, not regretting the betrayal that had made it necessary. Outside, I could hear car doors slamming as our former friends departed to deal with the wreckage of their marriages. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. Divorce papers, asset freezes, custody battles, social ostracism. The three men who had thought themselves so clever were about to learn the true cost of their arrogance. Aiden stood slowly, her perfect posture finally crumbling under the weight of exposure. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. All of them. She walked toward the stairs, probably to pack a bag or make phone calls to her network of fellow conspirators. Her 18 months of systematic deception were over, but the aftermath would last much longer. I began clearing the table, noting that none of our guests had finished their chocolate soufflé. The dessert that was supposed to be the evening's sweet conclusion had instead become the bitter accompaniment to revelation and destruction. By morning, there would be 3 for sale signs on our street. As marriages collapsed and lives were rebuilt, the perfect neighborhood Eden had used as hunting grounds would be transformed into a battlefield of divorce proceedings and social recrimination. I had learned well from my wife's example. Meticulous planning, attention to detail, and perfect timing could indeed create devastating results. The student had become the teacher, and the lesson was complete.